Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Peppis, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. My guest today is Habib Iddrisu, Assistant Professor of Ethnomusicology and Dance at the University of Oregon. Iddrisu is a traditionally trained dancer, musician, and historian from northern Ghana. His research interests include West African music and dance practice and performance, cultural studies, post-colonial independence history, oral history, and African diaspora studies. Iddrisu's current research focuses on how indigenous performance practices change when they move from villages to the international stage. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Tell us about how your background and your family history led to your life as a dancer, musician, and performer.
So this is what I usually would say, by default, I was born to be a musician and dancer, and it's because of my lineage. I was born into a group in northern Ghana among the Dagbamba people called the Bezang or Lunsi, and our primary role is to kind of give life to the oral history of our people. So there is almost like every single occasion the drummers are present, and not only that, so we carry on with the history that has been passed down orally from generation to generation. So growing up, it was almost like destined for me to be there because I was playing the drums and hanging out with my grandfather, who was a chief drummer, and also my great uncles, who were also part of the lineage, the Bezang family.
You mentioned that it's part of an oral tradition, and I know that you play the talking drum, and then there's a supporting drum. And when I think drumming or dancing, I don't think oral tradition. So help me to understand the relationship between oral tradition and these performance traditions that are related.
Oral in the sense that almost every single ethnicity south of the Sahara do not have a written language. So everything that is that we learn, the knowledge is passed down through oral. And the performance aspect of it makes it even more interesting in a sense that it keeps it alive. I think if it was just saying things orally without the musical structure behind it, some of the things would have been either the younger generation would be less interested, but because there is that aspect of music, that is another pool part of it. So
you mentioned that this is general in sub-Saharan Africa. Is it particularly strong tradition in Ghana? I know that in America, most of the African music studies programs focus on Ghanaian music. Is Ghana, sort of the most important West African, sub-Saharan African nation for this kind of performance?
Talking from a Ghanaian perspective, I would have said yes, but no, that is not the case. I would speculate here that perhaps the reason why Ghana became the center is because it was the first sub-Saharan African nation to gain independence from colonial Europe. That was in March 6, 1957, and by doing that, the reason why we also became a little bit more into this, it's not a leadership role, but more so like opening the opportunity, is the fact that the first president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, saw the power of the arts that could lead this new nation. So that is where Ghana became most of the focal point. But like I said, every single African country is equally important in that direction.
Can you tell us, are there any characteristics that are distinctive about Ghanaian dance and drumming and performance?
Absolutely. First of all, the people are very friendly, just putting that aside. So Ghana is very intriguing, just like many of our sister countries, and in a sense that we have over 50 different languages spoken. And what is so unique about this is that I'm from the Dagbamba people of northern Ghana. I have friends that live in, should I say, southeastern part of Ghana, that are the Ewe people. So when you look at these two distinct groups, our music styles are very different. Not only that, but the the visual of the musical instruments are completely different. And this, you can multiply that by a number of our ethnic groups in Ghana. So you see that almost every group has a very unique tradition, living in that small space, like the size of the state of Oregon. So that's why I would say it's very unique.
So I saw you give a talk on Thursday of last week, and you were talking about the multi-ethnic drummer.
Yes.
And you explained in the talk that there are drummers who don't do multi-ethnic drumming. That is to say, they're working very much within the context of their particular people's practices.
Yes.
Why is why is this multi-ethnic performance practice important for you?
In a sense that, so I'll be in that category that you were talking about. If I was to just follow with my tradition, I'll only be a Dagbamba Longa, the talking drum player. But because of the vision of the first president, like I said, of Ghana, and also the ethnomusicologist, Kobnan Ketia, and the dance ethnologist, who we call Professor Mario Poku, the vision was to bring all these varied traditions, like sometimes contradictory space, into one and creating a national identity through the arts. So this is where it became really important that we were able to come up with multi-ethnic master drummers, because you do not only play what you have from your neighborhood, but you also learn to play from another perspective.
So you've had success in Ghana, in West Africa more generally, and internationally as a musician, a dancer, and performer. How did you move out of Ghana and start performing elsewhere? Why was that an important part of your journey?
The first part had to do with the traditional, should I say, the amateur groups that I was a part of, starting from northern Ghana, and then also ended up in the capital city of Ghana, which is Accra. So I was part of groups, multiple groups that did this variety of dance forms. And we had a chance to travel outside Ghana mostly. And also ended up with the University of Ghana, one of the national companies called Habib Iddrisu. And our goal was just to attend to conferences and performance outside the country. So right from that age, I was very, very intrigued with what was going on outside the continent of Africa. So my journey here started when I was visiting with my American mother, Professor Claudia Melrose, who is Professor Emerita from the University of Wisconsin. And then a professor from Bowling Green, Ohio, was doing a clinic. And part of his talk had to do with Ghanaian dance. So I was just there by chance. And we ended up playing drumming. And so that same year when I went back home, he was there with his student. And the idea was I was ready to go to college. So we had to find a way so that I could come to study in the Bowling Green State University in Ohio, while at the same time giving some of my expertise to the students and the communities. So this is how my journey absolutely started. And I've always been fascinated with what is outside my immediate boundaries. And so coming was a great experience for me.
So why I mean, you've given a very specific case. Why getting, I mean, you've got MAs, you now have a PhD. What's the relationship between being an ethnomusicologist, an academic, and being a performer? I mean, I think some people might say, "What? You're a performer? Why go be in the ivory tower? Why is that an important part?"
Yeah, I think it's also just based on, like I said, by default, I was born to be a historian, a musician, and our role is not only to entertain our people, but is to teach. So right from the early ages, my interest was already lined up with what I was supposed to be doing with my lineage. So I realized, and I have over 40-something cousins. My grandfather has so many grandchildren, you can imagine. And not everybody followed that path. But for me, it was more important not only having the talent to dance and then to drum, but getting even more advanced degrees to support what I was brought up early age doing.
So what attracted you to the University of Oregon in particular?
I think we'll have to say my wife. In a sense
always
that,
a good reason.
Yeah, my wife was born and raised here in Eugene. Got degrees from different places, including Colorado, University of Colorado Boulder, and then also Portland State. So when I was just finishing my PhD and also finishing my presidential fellowship in upstate New York. So we were thinking of getting together, and I realized it would be very nice, at least from my part, to move to where she was brought up. It would have been really bad for me to take her from her people. And the best part of it, the weather too, and just that University of Oregon has such a great reputation with the research and teaching, which is something that was kind of almost, that just defined what I like to do. I like to be teaching and performing and at the same time researching. So
your research, I know, is about what happens to these traditional indigenous forms of performance when they leave the village setting.
Yes.
So what happens to these traditional forms of performance when they leave the village setting?
And that is the question I've always been fascinated with. An example is that when they leave, they also make their way back, sometimes in the forms that we do not even recognize beside the name. And this, the transformation of these different layers was what I was kind of very interested in, and I'm still interested in. It's like, what happened in between? And to tell you, from Tamale, which is the regional capital of the northern Ghana, which is about 270 miles or so from the capital, there is so much that changed in one music form from my village. And those transformations were just something that I'm kind of very interested. And then just following it back to the village and see what people think about it. And
so when those forms are brought outside of Africa, internationally, what happens then? I mean, you know, I know Paul Simon makes an album collaborating with a bunch of African collaborators, and suddenly Americans are all interested in African music. Yes. Do you see this as a kind of political program, or a kind of to help educate the West about Africa?
Yeah, I think the vision of Kwame Nkrumah, one of the many visions, was to kind of portray the African in a complete different image than what the West knew. And so sending this sophisticated music and dance form to tell people, look, it takes a lot of brain power to be able to come out. He was able to achieve some aspect of that. So politically, I would say yes, the idea was to kind of get people to look beyond what they already know about Africa, and that has just exploded and created a whole lot of followings that people really, really appreciate from this side of the world.
So you are also a leader of, you have been a leader of a variety of performance groups, dance troupes, and you now have a new performance ensemble here, Dema?
Yeah, Dema.
So tell us about that. How did that get started, and who's in that group, and what's it about?
So Dema is what we call the total African experience. I was looking at the idea of what we do back home mostly when there is a dance. The dance is not isolated from the music, the story behind it, and sometimes even the singing all combined. So when I got this position, and also my relationship with music, ethnomusicology, and dance, I thought there would be a great opportunity for me to bring both areas. And the overarching theme is to make sure that it's become something like a research laboratory, not only for the ethnomusicologists who might be interested in it, or dance ethnographers who might be interested in it, but somebody in anthropology who is interested in the cultural aspect of performance, and all sort of people. So the primary goal is to give the community, especially our students, the opportunity to work within this ensemble, even though it's just performance, but it's something that I think will enrich their life on campus.
So clearly there's just a major educational component to what you do in the group. Tell us about your pedagogy in the classroom. What do you do in there?
In Demma aspect?
Just in
everything. Okay, so what I've been trying to do especially with ethnomusicology, is the idea of theory combined with practice. And I know it's very tricky. Not everybody gets into that point. So, for instance, I have an African music class that is a survey class. So what I do most often is to give them the historical background of what we're doing and then let them research. This could lead into a variety of music forms. But once in a week, I get these students to what I call the hands-on. Like, you will not be graded on this, but I just want to see how that supplements our readings and other things. And it turned out to be one of the greatest way of approaching this, at least that aspect of the class. So I get them involved, challenge them, critical thinking on one day, and the other day also critical thinking. This time you are using memorization, and then the techniques on the drums. So that's what I have been.
And what about in Dema? How do you work that?
So Demma too is open to both musicians and dancers. What I've been doing is that because it's a varied credit, you can take it for 1 credit. In that case, performance is the ultimate goal. From 2 to 3, you are not only performing, but you are also reading materials that are assigned and doing research towards that. And that way I have different level of student interest in there. So we also have 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays nights. We do both. Right now, I have less people interested in drumming more so than those in the dance, but I try to give them the idea, especially I just set up a piece that even if you are just a dancer, you at some point in the piece you get to drum. So, and they love it. So we're beginning to build that idea of going back and forth between the 2 areas.
So how often does the group perform?
We have not, this is our week 8. Yeah, so we just kind of, and they're very fast learners. I'm so lucky to have first timers, and they're so involved. Our first show, what we're going to do is going to be a recruitment kind of a performance during the showing in week 10. It will be the last Thursday in week 10. So Demma will do a little bit of what we've been working, just aside. So,
is this group going to extend beyond the term?
Yes. The idea is to have a year-long classes offering towards our spring concert. And I believe, if I'm right, in spring we're going to have the big concert, which will fall on May 21st and 22nd. So the idea is to work our way all the way to the end and just put up a great show, and also to keep the students engaged and more, shall I say, more challenging. I decided to make it whatever we learn in first term, we will not repeat it in second term or third term. So it will be a progression of new and more stuff, so that everybody can be happy.
So you've talked about that performance. Do you do other performance on your own or with other groups in the region or vicinity?
Mostly my performances have been outside of Oregon. Just go and give a talk here and there and perform, but not much. And since I'm a junior faculty and coming in, the research side, especially the written aspect, is what I have to spend time doing. So Demma will be satisfying the other side of my appointment while I start to put my writings together. So I've been talking to senior colleagues, and some of the good advice that I've been getting is that your first year is as important as your 6th year. So make sure that you start right away. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm limiting movements, at least for this year, to just being on campus and concentrating on both the dance aspect and then also my writing side.
So tell us a little bit about the research that you're engaged in right now.
Right now, I'm working on something that I'm writing with my mentor, Steve Cornelius, the ethnomusicologist who brought me to Ohio to begin with. And we are trying to put up a book chapter in African dance. There's a void when it comes to not textbooks aside, but just rich books about African performance, especially sub-Saharan Africa. So we're trying to kind of write that, because I was asked by Kariamu Wells Ashanti who wrote an earlier book that was published, I believe, in '98, and there hasn't been something like that. So we're trying to revamp and bring something new to reflect on this, and it is based on that. And I'm using one particular music and dance that is known, but not known in terms of its purpose. So Steve and I are working it back and forth to create that.
What is that particular style?
It's called Bamaya. It's called Bamaya, and it's also involved music and dance as well. So
can you give us a sense of it?
Yes. So Bamaya is a music and dance form from the Dagbamba people that surprisingly is one of the most performed Ghanaian music dance in the diaspora. And also when you go back to Ghana, we have a lot of groups that are not the professional groups. This dance just happened to be their favorite. And I think it has to do with the music and also the costumes and all that. So I'm coming in here to just say that even though you are really interested in this, but this is why it's being performed. And I think that aspect is missing. And that's why me and Steve want to enrich the dancers, those who are enjoying it and those who are yet to enjoy that form.
So when I went to your talk the other day, you did some performance, you showed some videos as well, and I'm wondering about the challenges of writing about, in a scholarly way, these kinds of performance practices when your actual physical presence, your performance, or the film of them is so critical. How do you solve that problem?
Yeah, so my new project, I'm trying to kind of marry the two together, having the written part and then also movement part. I haven't figured out what to do yet, but I think with time and also with all this great technology, perhaps I might be able to give the readers, they're not just reading it, but able to see what it is. And not that many books have the video component to it, and perhaps this will be a great way for me to explore and see what is available out there to combine the two. Because like I said, some of these dances, if you try to notate them, then you'll be in trouble, because there is no general accepted, maybe one methodology of notating African dance forms or music. So I'm trying as much as possible to not do that, but to just kind of give the general description and perhaps use the movement, because I'm also an accomplished performer. So how do I put that into the writing? So that's all.
Yeah, we interviewed a fellow last year who had, whose book was an e-book that had video embedded in it.
Oh, awesome.
Kevin Newt is his name, and he's in landscape architecture, I think.
Oh,
so you might want to talk to him.
I might want to talk to Kevin Newt, and he's
here.
I will look. Oh, that will be exciting. So.
You've been here in the United States for how many years?
It's about 15 years now.
So what's sort of been the most challenging part of your time here? Are you way beyond any kind of cultural shock, or are there still things that are surprising you about the United States?
Yes, the food.
The food.
But the good thing is that we are able to make our own food. But yes, the term cultural shock is something that I think does not end. That is my experience.
It's never ending.
It never ends. It's like constantly you think, oh, I know this, and the next time there's something new that puts you. But other than that, I have adjusted very well. And partly because I have an amazing family, and then also colleagues that are so supportive. So,
what's been your biggest surprise being a professor in the United States at the University of Oregon? What's the most surprising thing that's happened to you here?
The idea of a professor and student relationship was one of the biggest. I don't know if this is back home when I was growing up, the British system, the gap that was like the professor was right there, the students here. Here it's kind of almost like you see your professor, but you're still able to come in. I'm not saying the British system back home is not the right way, but I think here students are able to ask questions. Other than that, when I was back home, I would have been so kind of afraid to do. So I really, it's one of the biggest things that I've taken from here, which is really great.
I'm also interested in I assume that most of the students that you're teaching are white students, and the people that are performing in the group are white kids or white young people. Is that, do you see part of your responsibility as a kind of racial education, or do you have concerns about non-Africans performing these techniques? Or?
Yeah, I do have concern of non-Africans not taking it, but not in terms of race. I think even coming from back home, what we were told is when you go to the United States, get a law degree, get a business degree, and then the performing arts tend to suffer. I don't know if it is the same here too.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised at all when I have an ensemble and I don't get the African or African descendants take that ensemble, because based on my experience is that when you are in college, you should be getting a business degree or something to that nature. And this is where Dema is very important. We say, hey, you get your law degree, get whatever degree you want, but just adding this part makes your life experience on campus even more better. And I'll say that in a sense that coming to the United States, some of the most intriguing, shall I say, life-changing experiences that did not come from my area of studies. They came just being part of the university community that was something where not really in my box. So I'm going to use my position here to go knock at people's doors, especially I do understand that the demography here is mostly white, but I will do everything, especially with the support from Equity and Inclusions program. I'll try to see whatever venues are there so I can go and include. I think it will be a great ensemble if we have diversity every part of the country, because United States, I can still say, is one of the most diverse country in the world. So this ensembles, if I can find a way to reflect that, I would have done my job here. So,
would you? Is it an ambition of yours to take Dema outside of Oregon? Have you thought about that?
Absolutely, and not only outside of Oregon to the nearest state or in the United States. I'm even thinking of giving the students some international experience, because I'm so also connected with the University of Ghana, where I came from, and what an honor it will be for us to just go back and have a performance with the university, and then go back to the same villages I was talking about and just kind of share what we have. And I believe people back home seeing some of these things would really, really appreciate it. I remember the first time I got into some of these things, like trying to get the highest degrees, beside my curiosity, was the fact that there were two Caucasians, I call them my uncles, John Chenoff and David Locke, Boston. They were the first in my area to come, Americans, to study the tradition of the drums. And so that, just by looking at that, inspired me a lot. So I'm thinking if we are able to get this mixture of students and take it back there, it might be able to kind of maybe spark another generation interest to go beyond, to embrace what they have, because I think it's a great tradition.
Well, that is a wonderful place for us to end. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been speaking with Habib Iddrisu, Assistant Professor of Ethnomusicology and Dance at the University of Oregon. Thanks so much for watching.